Good day, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our presentation on reporting individual case study reports to FAERS using ICH E2B R3 standards. This webinar will describe the regional technical specification and implementation process for receiving safety reports to FAERS using ICH E2B R3 and regional data elements, and discuss regional E2B data elements for pre-market and post-market safety reporting and provisions for submission of safety reports to FAERS that satisfy requirements for safety reporting regulations and FDA guidance. My name is Ray Ford, and I'm with the Small Business and Industry Assistance Program, which operates within the Division of Drug Information, which in turn resides in FDA's Center for Drug Evaluation and Research Office of Communications. I'll serve as your host and moderator for today's webinar. For your convenience, this slide provides QR codes for our social media avenues. You can scan them now with your phone and be taken to the appropriate platform. Before we begin, I'd like to cover some details. Slides for today's presentation are available from the right-hand side of your screen where the orange button says Download the presentation. This activity is eligible for an attendance certificate which supports continuing education by SOCRA, RAPS, SQA, and ACRP. Please refer to our website at fda.gov/CEDAR-SBIA for more details. You'll be able to obtain the attendance certificate only upon completion of the survey, which will remain open for 2 weeks. Please remember to download the certificate immediately upon completing the survey. It cannot be retrieved after the fact. And that means the survey will close on January the 27th. Even if you don't need the certificate, we'd appreciate it if you let us know your comments and feedback via the survey. This webinar will be posted in its entirety on our website within 5 business days. That website is fda.gov/CEDAR-SBIA Learn. Additional tutorials are available through fda.gov/CEDAR Learn. We have several upcoming events in 2023 that we'd like to remind you about. Our 3 upcoming webinars will provide CE for physicians, nurses, and pharmacists. On January the 26th, our first webinar is on FDA's labeling resources for human prescription drugs. On February the 1st, the next webinar is an overview of FDA's proposed rule, non-prescription drug products with an additional condition for non-prescription use. And on February the 15th, the final third webinar is an overview of the clinical pharmacology considerations for neonatal studies. And please join us on February the 24th for the joint FDA Health Canada ICH public meeting. To outline today's event, the webinar in its entirety will run approximately 1 hour, which includes a Q&A session. And if you have questions now or during the webinar, please enter those questions into the Q&A chat pod. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Our speaker for today's webinar is Suranjan Day, Regulatory Science Staff, Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology, CEDAR FDA. Now please join me in welcoming our presenter for today's webinar, Suranjan Day.
Good morning and a happy new year. Today we will discuss reporting pre-market and post-market safety reports to FDA using ICH E2B R3 standards. My name is Suranjan Day and I am the Deputy Director for Regulatory Science in Office of Surveillance and Epidemiology in CEDAR in FDA. Outline for today's webinar includes the background of E2B R2 reporting at the FDA. We will go over the specific FDA regional implementation, including data elements, updates to submission methods and submission paths, discuss extension for IND Safety Reporting and IND Exempt BABE safety reports. Finally, we'll go over high-level testing and implementation plan. FDA initially had planned to implement E2B R2 for pre-market ICSR reporting and then move to E2B R3. The initial plan changed, and now FDA will implement E2B R3 for both pre-market and post-market safety reporting at the same time. This change was decided based on the complexity to migrate E2B R2 to R3 and suggestions from the industry. This change pushed the timelines as there were dependencies in updating and clearing the 745A final guidance, updating technical specifications to include E2B R3, regional elements, and vendor timelines to update safety database to incorporate the changes. FDA is currently working on the development activities to incorporate E2B R3 in FAERS. Once FAERS is ready, a new date for voluntary reporting of pre-market and post-market reports in E2B R3 format will be communicated on the FAERS electronic submission webpage. The E2B stay that FDA will support E2B R3 for pre-market and both R2 and R3 for post-market. At some point, FDA will retire the submission of post-market reports in R2 format. This date is yet to be decided and will be based on how soon companies move over from R2 to R3. Additionally, information about E2B R3 testing and implementation will be made available on the FAERS electronic submission web page as FDA proceeds through this implementation. FDA will refer to the regional data elements and changes as regional extension. FDA recommends the use of XML data element display name to facilitate human and computer system identification and understanding. For example, to report ethnicity of patients, use the display name as the name of the data element. Submissions to FAERS, sends two acknowledgements back. The first is the MDN and the second one from FAERS. The second acknowledgement notifies if the ICSR was accepted or rejected. On the regional extension, or one of the regional extension was the change in maximum length for the ICH data element ACK.B.R.7 from 250 characters to 2000 characters. Also, refer to for information on all ICH and regional extension, please refer to the FDA E2B R3 core and regional element and business rule document. This is an Excel spreadsheet listing all data elements, their attributes, conformance, business rules for rejection and warning, and expats. Some data element conformance may vary from ICH to from ICH, ICSR, IG due to regional needs and are visually noted in the FDA E2B R3 core and regional element and business rule document. So with E2B R3 implementation for FDA, following are the control vocabularies used. Some of the observation codes for specific regional extensions are from the EVS, which is the Enterprise Vocabulary Services. Also, ICS data elements that use FDA controlled vocabularies are listed in the relevant section of the technical specification. So ICH elements, again, look for in the technical specifications for details. So let's go over the submission methods and mechanisms. So submission methods. So if a company chooses to use option A, so actually there are two options, A and B, which is database via to database transmission. The sponsor submits the E2B XML and goes to the gateway. From the gateway, the first acknowledgement or the MDN goes back to the sponsor. That XML goes into the FAERS database. FAERS then sends a second acknowledgement to the gateway, and then the sponsor picks up the acknowledgement too and processes it. The second method, which is option B, is via a safety reporting portal. So it's a web-based portal. A sponsor has to data enter their ICSR into the web-based portal, which internally actually creates an E2B XML and puts it onto the gateway, which then goes to FAERS. The thing that it's important to note that SRP requires sponsors to register and receive login credentials. So as we said, option A, database to database transmission, and option B is the safety reporting portal. More of the safety reporting portal. Okay. The safety reporting portal is intended for sponsors and CROs who do not have a infrastructure of gateway submissions. You can submit individual reports only, no batch reporting, and can be used for both commercial and research IND safety reporting, and as well as IND Exemption BE safety reporting. If you're a CRO, separate accounts needs to be created for different sponsors or license holder. Post and pre-market reporting, it's maintained separately. You have to select upfront and then can navigate between them. You have to complete basically an online form. It has no cost. And to get an account, you have to shoot an email to the FAERS esap@fda.ahs.gov. Now, this safety reporting portal is currently used by companies to submit post-market safety report. Once the online form for pre-market safety reports are ready, FAERS electronic submission web page will update to notify its availability. And from that point, you can request for an account. And once account is ready, you can start submitting your safety reports. FDA defines two header attributes and routing IDs for pre-market safety report. There are no changes to routing paths for post-market safety reports. These separate paths allow routing reports to the appropriate reviewer and differentiates pre and post-market, enabling FDA to not publish pre-market reports publicly. So this is another pictorial view of the separate submission paths, and the EASG will triage the ICSR based on AS2 header or routing ID attributes and make sure that the data values in the ICSRs and the submission attributes are coordinated. So if you look at that, you have the pre-market goes here. You have for CBER pre-market, you see that the values in the E2B, you have the post-market, and then you have the values that is in the XML. Okay. So now let's discuss the specific sections of an ICSR. And I will go over the changes. A lot of details are actually in the Excel spreadsheet of the regional elements and business rules document. So the first section we will go over is section N1. Okay. So the table describes the attribute values that must be used in submitting CEDAR IND ICSR, CBER IND ICSR, CEDAR IND Exempt BE ICSR, and post-market ICSRs. The AS2 header or routing ID defines the ESG folder where the XML file will be routed to. So when FAERS imports the XML files from a folder, for example, where CEDAR IND or IND exempts are stored, FAERS will verify that the value of N14 and N2R3 are as per the values in the table. Please note that if the message receiver identifier, okay, is equal to CDR, okay, then the batch receiver identifier must be ZZFDA. Similarly, if the message receiver identifier is equal to CDR underscore IND or CDR underscore IND or CDR underscore IND underscore exempt underscore BA underscore PE, then the batch receiver identifier must be ZZFDA underscore PreMarket. These business rules have been defined to make sure that pre-market and post-market reports are clearly delineated and the pre-market reports are not published publicly. So it's a very important thing to note and to comply to so that we all together can make sure that the pre-market reports are not published publicly. Next, we will discuss data elements under section C1. This is a regional data element that describes within how many days the ICSR was submitted. So this data element is sort of the local criteria report type. So this is the criteria by which you say it's a 15-day, 15-day, 7-day, 15-day, 30-day, 5-day, and so on and so forth. Right. So in this, you have the data element, the max ID, the data type, conformance, which is required, and then you have the business rules. They are all defined in this particular document. Of course, also the observation code, which is the values allowed, is also defined in this document if you look against this particular data element. All right, next we will discuss next we will discuss the data element C17. So does the case fulfill the local criteria for an expedited report? So for this particular field, it's a ICH field. We specify whether the case fulfills a regional specification for expedited reporting. Now, why this field has been put here as a regional variation or a regional extension, it's because of the field before that we discussed, which is called the local criteria report type. If that is 7-day, 15-day, or 5-day reports are considered expedited reports, so then C17 must be true. And local criteria report type is non-expedited or 30-day. They consider non-expedited report and must be false. Another important thing is linking initial and follow-up ICSR. So always use the same identifier for data elements, sender safety report unique identifier that was assigned to the initial ICSR when submitting the follow-up report for the life cycle of the case. Okay. FDA C5A and 5B and 5.6R. These three elements will be discussed later when we go over the IND and IND Exemption BE safety report. Next section D, which is patient characteristics. As per regional extension D1, patient name and initial. Even though this is ICH field, we call it as an extension because we have some rules and values that needs to be put into this field based on certain conditions. Okay. So for a post-market report, if no patient involved on a compounding product or medication error incident, then use null flavor NA for the value of the data element D1. If post-market report is about a combination product malfunction and no adverse event, then use the null flavor NA. And if post-market report is about malfunction on a batch of combination product with no adverse event, then again use the null flavor NA. Another field which is a regional data field is FDA D11R, which is patient race code. So sender must submit multiple observation code, may submit multiple observation codes for patient race, and the details about this you can see in this document. And then you have the patient ethnicity code, may submit only one observation code. Now, if you look at this particular document, which is the FDA E2B R3 core regional data elements and business rules. These two are required fields, so which means they actually have null flavors in when you don't have any information. And that is documented in this particular document. The next we will discuss section GK, which is the drug information. So GK211B, medicinal product, with MPID. So what we're requesting is that companies can use the NDC code when known. Okay, so it's not mandatory. When known, should be used as a regional MPID for that field. Now GK22 medicinal product name. So FDA validates this name for a product marketed in the United States against the available structured product labeling. If the medicinal product name is not provided, but the active substance is known, then provide the active substance names as it appears in the FDA's Global Substance Registration System. If foreign product trade name, then provide the active substance name as it appears in the FDA's Global Substance Registration System. Now the specified substance term ID. So always populate this data element substance name and populate the term ID if available using the GSRS uni. Okay, so which means here you should always give me the name, but if you have the term ID, that would be great. And the term ID should be the GSRS uni. So that way I can very easily, FDA can use that Unicode to very easily validate the substance name. And these Unicodes are updated monthly and may be obtained from the FDA's GSRS uni list. The authorization number. So here is the format, how authorization number needs to be set up. Okay, you can see the slides. I won't read through it. But one important point which I want to make, that please note that for IND and IND Exempt BAB safety reports that are reporting on marketed drug products and biological products being evaluated under an IND or IND Exempt BAB, do not place the IND number or the Preender number in this field. Okay, use the data element IND number where adverse event occurred and IND Preender number where the adverse event occurred for IND and IND Exempt BAB respectively. Now what are these two fields? We will discuss about these two fields when we talk about IND Safety Reporting and IND Exempt BAB Safety Reporting. Next data element is FDA Additional Information on Drug. This is again a regional element. One point I want to make is any data element number that you see, if it has a FDA as a prefix, FDA dot, that means that is a regional element. So this element is used to provide characteristic associated with product information. The codes comprises of product exposure in a IND Exempt BAB study and about compounding products. And please look at this particular document for details on this field, FDA Additional Information on Drugs. FDA Specialized Product Category. So this is another regional data elements used to provide characteristics associated with combination products. And again, if you want to see the details about these particular data element, please, I would refer you to the FDA E2B R3 core and regional data elements and business rules for details. Next is the device information. Why do we have device information? Because of combination product. So FDA has provided regional extension to accommodate reports for combination products as required by the 21 CFR Part 4, Part B, which was added by the Post-Marketing Safety Reporting for Combination Products rule. Now, all this, I have not listed all the elements here, but if you go back to the document, the Excel spreadsheet, which is the FDA E2B R3 core and regional data elements and business rules, you will see the list of all the documents, all the elements for combination products, especially on the device side, on the device part. Now going into section E, which is related to the reaction event. So for combination product, enter MEDRA reaction term instead of the patient problem codes. For a malfunction only combination product report, enter a MEDRA code associated with the relevant product quality issue or the MEDRA LLT code, no adverse event. So which means you're saying that there was no adverse event. So using the MEDRA LLT code, no adverse event for that data element. And then you have special fields called device problem code, which you will report as because it has a malfunction in the appropriate field, which all falls under FDA GK12R. Another element under section EI is the FDA EI 3.2H, which is required intervention. It's a required data element. If not known, just use null flavor NI. So the submission rules are a section where the conditions and business rules, if not met, will result in rejection and warning. So here is where you have all the different rules that we have put in, the regional rules, and that will result in a rejection if not met, with a negative acknowledgement, of course. And we also have something called as warning rules that will notify a warning but result in a positive acknowledgement. Okay, so the reason why the warning is given is, sometimes we know this data value should be something like this, but companies have submitted something like that. And we're just telling the companies that, next time when you submit, it's really nice if you can correct them and submit them when you're doing a follow-up. Okay. Forward compatibility. So forward compatibility document only describes the rules for the regional extensions. For ICH data elements, please refer to the ICH document. Also, FDA's forward compatibility only applies to the post-market reports as we move from R2 to R3. For pre-market reports, we are straight jumping to R3. So now let's go over all the FDA's implementation package documents that we have. So one of the main document is the FDA Regional Implementation Guide for E2B R3, technical transmission for ICSRs for drug and biological products. So last was updated in August 2022. Purpose of this technical specification document is to assist submitters transmitting electronic ICSRs with attachments to the FAERS database. It describes FDA's technical approach for submitting ICSRs, for incorporating its regional control terminology, and for implementing regional extensions that are not in the ICH ICSR guide. Now, the next document goes along with the first document because the first document does not list every regional elements and every regional extension. The details are in the Excel spreadsheet. It just makes our publishing becomes much more easier if you put in the Excel spreadsheet. So that's the FDA E2B R3 core and regional data elements and business rules. It provides a comprehensive list of core ICH and FDA regional data elements attributes, conformance, business rules, expats, and acknowledgement attributes. It also has a revision history, so the changes that we have done will be documented in the revision history. And it has a README section in this Excel spreadsheet which tells you what are the different sections of this spreadsheet that has been defined. So some of the regional data elements in this documents are detailed in the FDA Regional Implementation Technical Specification, which is the first document. So they all both go hand in hand. So it's important that when you're implementing, you refer these two documents hand in hand. All right, the E2B-R3 forward compatible rule. So that will assist reporters and recipients in implementing system with special focus on recommended rules for conversion of data from regional E2B-R2 to regional E2B-R3, mostly applicable for PreMarket safety reporting. And finally, we have the fourth set, which is a zip file. This document or this zip file actually lists the scenarios provided as FDA ICSR XML instances and the acknowledgement samples, examples based on ICH E2B R3 technical specification document. The zip file also has a readme.txt file that describes the different scenarios. So now we go into IND safety reporting, right? So IND safety reporting, what's the current and the new process? So sponsors of clinical trial are required to submit IND safety report as per 21 CFR 312.32. So the current process is PDFs are submitted in ECTD format. It's inefficient and labor intensive review, lack of universal tracking. So with the new process, now IND safety reports would be submitted in ICH E2B XML format to FAERS, and that will allow the use of data visualization because data is structured, and analytics tool for review and tracking. And additionally, we'll leverage existing process in use for post-market safety report. So we already have the gateway set up, the standards are already there. So why not use that same standards and the same gateway? And in doing this, we are still complying with the existing federal regulations of 21 CFR 312.32. So in order to implement IND safety reporting, change in format is required under 745A. So sponsors of commercial IND must submit specified IND safety reports to FAERS by one of the two methods. Number one, using the electronic submission gateway, which is the ESG, and number two, via the safety reporting portal. Now this change will be effective 24 months after publication of the final guidance. The tentative goal is to begin voluntary submission by end of this year. But this all depends on the clearance of the guidances and the vendor providing the releases on time. Right? And FDA will publish the date on the FAERS electronic submission webpage 30 days prior to the start of the voluntary submission. Some of the communication that we will be doing is, as you see on the right hand side, this was a snippet from the FAERS electronic submission webpage that we have taken. So for pre-marketing safety reports, all these documents have already been published. So the whole idea of now having this SBI seminar is to telling you that please go through these documents, please get into these documents, start reading them, and start asking us questions if you have any doubts. So this particular site actually has the draft guidance of 745A, the technical conformance guide for IND safety reports, the technical specifications, the regional core data elements and business rule, and the XML instances. Right? We will continue to have these kind of webinars. One being we're going to have e-prompt meetings, and then other communications like DA or DIA conferences is where I'll be presenting about the reporting using E2B R3 to FDA. Now coming back to the table that describes the attribute values that must be used in submitting IND, CEDAR IND ICSR, CBER IND ICSR, in CEDAR IND Exempt PEB and Postmarket ICSR, the bold highlighted rows are for the submissions of the IND safety report. So this is very important to keep in mind that this is what when you're submitting a CEDAR IND, if you're using AS2 header, you need to use this particular values. If you're using routing ID, you need to do these values. And then if in the XML file, you need to have these values. Because all this together makes then the uniqueness to say that this is actually a pre-market report and for CEDAR, so that we very clearly know how to delineate them and not to make them public. And similarly for CBER. All right. Let's go into some of the case studies for IND safety reports. So not all IND safety reports will go into FAERS. So if you look here, these are the top three ones are the ones that will be submitted to FAERS, and the remaining ones that you submit to ACTT today will continue to go to ACTT. Okay. So, so from the first case study, so what do we get from there? First is no 1571 required. No cover letter for IND safety reports are required to be sent to FAERS. And how will process interactions between PV safety teams and regulatory affairs change? Uh, we believe that from the sponsor's perspective, uh, many of the sponsors are processing all these IND safety reports through their safety database, which then goes to the regulatory affairs, who then generates the 1571 and the cover letter and submit to ECTD. That entire process will eliminate or will be eliminated. So which means you don't have to go back to your regulatory affairs. So directly from your safety database, you should be able to submit the report to FAERS. Now, under IND safety reports, it's important reporting on the primary IND. Okay, so for reports to FAERS, only one IND safety report must be submitted to the IND where the event occurred. It's the primary IND. So the element name here comes IND number where the AE occurred. So this is a regional element. It's 10 numeric and conditional required. So the business rule is that if the report type of report is 2, which is report from study, and the message receiver identifier is CEDAR IND, okay, or CBER IND, then the IND number this occurred is required. Okay, so and the format must be this. So that if for IND reports submitted from an aggregate analysis, okay, from trials conducted under more than one IND, use the parent IND number. Okay, important to note. And finally, required to be a valid IND number for processing and routing. So if it's not valid, then the file will get rejected. Cross-reported IND. So what process change will be required to accommodate the new process of cross-reported IND? Great news, wonderful news. I think we'll all love it. You have to only submit one report. Okay. So other sponsors IND evaluating the same suspect product will be listed in the same report as below. So IND number for cross-reported IND. So this is a regional field. This is where you will notify all the other cross-reported IND, which is again 10 numeric and conditional required. So if IND number where AE occurred is populated, so which means the primary, right? Then IND number for cross-reported IND is required. You can use null flavor if there are no other cross-reported IND. Okay. So from reports from aggregate analysis, case study 4. So required as part of 21 CFR 312.32. Use parent IND number for primary IND. So what process change will be required for this new process? To identify the parent IND and linking the reports associated with this analysis. So here is what the elements are most important. Is a sender safety report unique identifier, C11. So here the value should be reports from aggregate analysis must have its own, very important, have its own sender safety report identifier. For all follow-ups, use the same value. IND number where AE occurred. So FDA C55A. So this is for IND safety report submitted from an aggregate analysis from trials conducted under more than one IND. Use the parent IND number. So the parent IND number must be used for IND number where AE occurred. Also under patient, because this is an aggregate, there's no truly individual patients. It's just one report. So in the patient, we are saying that please make that value of that element as aggregate. And then we have the identification number, which was the individual cases, okay, which is the linked cases. Next, we have investigational and approved drugs. So 2-arm trial, investigational drug A compared to approved drug B and or C. So in such case, you will have the suspect drug submitted under GK22, right? The substance under GK2R31, and of course the IND number and FDA C55A. Now, as compared to drug B or C, if there's B or C as suspect drug, okay, then the proprietary medicinal product name for drug B or C under GK22. So this will be the second record. Then you have the active drug substance name for drug B or C. And then if you had B and C, then you will repeat that twice for B and C, and same thing, the substance for B and C. Okay, so in such case, you will actually have, if you have suspect drug A and suspect drug B, then you have two records. If you for drugs, if you have suspect, and when you have suspect drug A and B and C, then you will have three records. So just keep this in mind. Okay, another scenario where investigational drug A plus approved drug B and C compared to approved drug B and C. Uh, so compared to approved drug B and C. So if you have all three, then if you look at it, that company code or proprietary name or medicinal product for drug A and proprietary and medicinal product for drug B and C, same thing, the active ingredient for drug A, B, and C. But if you had A and or B or C, then of course you put B or C or B and C and same sort of active substance. And of course the suspect drug was A, then you will have to have the company code or proprietary medicinal product name for A and the active substance name for drug A. And this all goes into the GK23R1 because that is the substance, because you can have more than one substance, so the substance can be repeated. And then you have medicinal product name, which is GK22. Next case study, drug approved under an IND. It's 2-arm trial. So if you look here, first you have suspect drug. Is drug A only. So again, proprietary medicinal product name for drug A and active substance name for drug A. This is an approved drug, all right? And then you have suspect drug is drug B and reports meet the IND Safety Reporting requirements. So it's a proprietary medicinal product name for drug B and the active substance name for drug B. And suspect drug A and drug B and report meets the safety requirements. Then field should be populated twice, proprietary name for drug A and B, and then proprietary and the active substance name for drug A and B. And of course, FDA C55A will have the IND number. Reporting of causality. So when we're doing reporting causality for IND safety reports, so the fields that we have, three important fields: source of assessment, method of assessment, and result of assessment. So under source of assessment, it's very important that you say it's the sponsor, and it is required if element value is report from study and IND number where adverse event occurred is provided. Okay, same conditional required for method of assessment. The value is FDA. Now remember that the values which I'm talking about is sponsor, FDA, and for result of assessment, suspected and non-suspected. They are not code list values. This is because this is a free text. So we are asking that if you can fill up these values, populate these values, then it becomes easier for FDA to read them and then to assess them. So for all the three fields, the conditional required is because of that the element value for report type is equal to 2 and the IND number where A occurred is provided. All right, so let's talk about IND exempt and bio for BA/BE study reporting. So in the Federal Register of September 29, 2010, FDA published a final rule that revised the IND, including bio-IND safety reporting requirements for human drug and biological product under 21 CFR Part 312. FDA, we added safety reporting requirements for persons conducting IND exempt BA/BE study, and this regulation outlines when BA and BE studies are exempt from IND requirements. So coming back to the table that describes the attribute values that must be used for submitting the CEDAR IND exempt BA/BE ICSRs, the bold highlighted rows are for the submission of IND exempt BA/BE safety reports. So it's very important to keep this relationship maintained so that the reports are appropriately uh, imported into our FAERS database and they are not published publicly. Element which is very important here is the concept of a pre-ANDA number where adverse event occurs. You have an ANDA number, but when you start to do a IND Exemption BB safety in a study, you have to request for something called the pre-ANDA number, which eventually, once it is approved, it will become an ANDA number. But the data element is called pre-ANDA number, but AE occurred. The max length is 10, numeric and conditional required because if it's report from study and the message receiver identifier is CEDAR IND Exemption BE, then the pre-ANDA number is required. So now you see how this message receiver identifier has become so important. And this requires to be a valid pre-ANDA number for processing and routing. Here is one case study, the reporting subject's drug exposure that occurs after the enrollment. So the data elements to be used is the drug characterization of the drug, it's a suspect, drug or not, and then you have the FDA additional information on the drug. So this is where this regional field comes into picture. It's the test drug or the reference drug. Then the drug identification section has got the medicinal product name and the drug substance name. So that's how you would put that. If the drug was, the exposure was before the enrollment, then that drug was not administered. So that's how you will use the value of 4 and and so on. And finally, we get into testing and implementation. So under testing and implementation, FDA plans to provide a mechanism for industry to validate the regional E2B R3 XML files prior to production submission. This mechanism will be available for use via the public URL. One can select the XML files generated from their safety database and validate using the tool. And all this information will be provided on the FAERS electronic submission web page. So here is how the tool looks like. You browse to pick the file and then click on validate. The tool will display under validation status any error at the bottom with detailed message. If the file is valid, the message under validation status will say valid XML file, which means now you're ready to submit that. For testing and implementation. So for testing, we want to do some sponsor testing. So we want to first identify sponsors who will be ready to test E2B R3 with regional extension. Uh, we perform testing for both, and these sponsors should be ready to perform testing for both pre and post-market ICSRs. Our testing timeline will be provided to the identified sponsors. One most important thing is that we will be able to go only up to 8 or 9 test sponsors who can help us in testing. We cannot go more than that because then that requires a lot more activities that needs to be done like FR notice and so on and so forth. You will still get the opportunity to test when you are ready, but this is the initial testing that we want to do based on the testing that we are doing at FDA with the sponsors, just to make sure that the gateways and every setup is all right. FDA will also provide the validator tool to pre-test senders ICSR. And once validated, sponsors can submit ICSRs in the pre-production environment and receive acts. And the sponsors continue to submit ICSRs in post-market submit ICSRs for post-market ICSR in R2 format until R3 is ready. And sponsors test both pre-market and post-market, including combo products. And also we'd recommend to use the 3 submission mechanisms or the paths to make sure that the pre-market for CEDARs, pre-market for CEDAR, CEDAR, and then the post-market for both CEDAR is submitted and you get the appropriate acknowledgement. All right, so sponsors must notify FDA when they're ready for first production submission. to FDA and E2B R3 format, and all questions during the testing must be sent to eprompt@fda.hhs.gov. Now, I talked about safety reporting portal. That could be a mechanism that sponsors can use while they are working on to implement E2B R3 in their organization to submit to FDA. Because you may already have E2B R3, but you may not have the regional extensions that FDA is requiring. So your vendors may have, you may have to work with your vendors to get those extensions. While that is happening, during the voluntary submission period for pre-market ICSRs, FDA is recommending to use the safety reporting portal so they can directly submit to FDA. Submissions of 1571 cover letter will not be required, and this eliminates sending reports to your company's regulatory affairs. I think this is a huge benefit for both us getting the report electronically and for getting the report and for the sponsors to not go through this process that they go through today, which I think is a huge benefit from timing perspective and cost perspective. And then once you're ready with submitting pre-market safety report in E2B R3 format via the gateway, then SRP account will be deactivated for pre-market safety reports. And the SRP provides a feature where SRP can generate a safety report ID, or manually the company can put in a safety report ID that they had already generated. So that way, you can keep that safety report ID that you have already generated, even though you have moved now to the gateway from the safety reporting portal. Okay. So with that, I end my presentation and we will be open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation. We'll now transition into our Q&A session. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. We had quite a few questions coming in, and the first question for Saranjan is the following. Will FDA no longer accept IND safety reports via ECTD at a future point in time?
Thank you, Ray. So for the first question, yes, at a future point in time, once the 745A guidance is published, companies will have 2 years to set up and submit safety reports. That is a voluntary period, after which no safety reports would be allowed to be submitted to the ECTD, and they will all be submitted either through safety reporting portal or through the gateway, which will all end up in FAERS. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have another question, and a little bit of background. All MAH in Europe have received in December a letter from the EMA indicating that ICSRs should be sent to third countries, for example, USA, with anonymization of the country code. Such, for an example, EU for Europe must be used instead of the national country code like FR, DE, etc. Could you please confirm that FDA will be able to manage those cases coded EU as country code and they will not be rejected?
The answer is yes. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. The next question. Since EMA has already implemented the R3 format for pre and post-market cases, when can we expect FDA to be ready with the R3 format and gateway transmission of CT cases?
All right. As in the presentation, you saw that we want to implement both pre and post market at the same time. We have an estimated goal that we want to go by end of this year to be ready to submit ICSRs in E2B R3 format for both pre-market and post-market. So more information would come on the FAERS electronic submission webpage on an exact date. Uh, and from that point onwards, companies could then submit um, ICSRs for both post-market and pre-market to FAERS. And when I talk about post-market, which means, pre-market, it includes IND safety reports as well as IND Exemption BABE safety reports. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have more questions coming in. And here is the next question. For G.2.2, medicinal product name as reported by the primary source, do you prefer the reported term or rather the one to which we code the product in our safety system, which would rather match with your product dictionary?
So for this particular data point, you could use the coded, whatever you have, the sponsor has coded, and then submit to FAIRS so that FAIRS can very easily auto code that to the FAIRS product dictionary. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a question about devices, and here is the question. For device codes, will FDA accept IMDRF codes?
And the answer is yes. Next, thank you.
Moving on to our next question in regards to data, the mandatory date of, is there a mandatory date of implementation?
Uh, thank you. Uh, as mentioned earlier, that for pre-market safety reports, once a 745A is published, companies would get 2 years to prepare and start submitting, so you could take that 2 years as a voluntary period, and as the 2 years is over, then it becomes mandatory to submit electronically. And for the pre-market safety reports, and for the post-market safety reports, we already have a electronic submission reporting rule to submit electronically. So once sponsors move over to E2B R3, when can E2B R3, E2B R2 be retired will all depend upon how soon the companies are moving, and but typically we would expect that in the 2 years from when they can start in submitting E2B R3, we would retire R2. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to the next question is the following. Would the requirements for the G.K.2.2 field be applicable for only suspect products, those flagged as suspect, or does this also apply to other flags such as concomitant medications?
Yes, the GK22 has values that is suspect, concomitant, interacting, and drug not administered. So yes, concomitant is can be provided in GK22. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. And the next question is the following. The values presented for the D.1 patient field are the mandatory values for the conditions presented. For example, we must use the NFNA for malfunction reports without an AE.
And the answer is yes. So for malfunction reports without an adverse event, uh, you would submit NA for the D1 data element. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Our next question is the following. How should follow-ups to cases be handled for which the previous versions were sent via ECTD.
Yes. So what FDA plans to do is the data that was submitted through ECTD, we do have a process which is happening today is to extracting that information and making it more structured and actionable. So that those previous versions will be migrated over to FAIRS so that when you start submitting your safety reports, uh, the FAIR system will automatically identify if it is a follow-up or an initial. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have more questions coming in right now that are being reviewed. And here is the next question. Will there be an opportunity to submit a test submission when FAIRS is live to ensure that we submit correctly and learn how to use the system?
Yes. The answer to this is yes, you will have, before you start submitting the E2B R3 to FAIRS, we would definitely recommend that you connect with the FAIRS eSub at fda.hhs.gov, who will guide you on the test submissions. Where we also are, as I mentioned, that we are going to also have the validator where you can use and test your files before you do your test submission and get your acknowledgement accordingly, so that you have ensured that when you submit to production, your files are submitted correctly and you get your acknowledgement appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got just a little under 2 minutes left, so we'll try to get a couple more questions in. And here is the next question. What about concomitant drugs in IND safety reports?
So yes, you could submit the concomitant drug in the drug section of the IND safety report and with the drug characterization as concomitant. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. And here is the next question. What exactly does a method of assessment equal to FDA mean? Is there a document that lays out how causality assessments should be made according to the FDA, or is this just a dummy value?
So, so companies make their causality assessment, and there are different causality assessment methods that they use, as we have seen in the different safety reports that we have received earlier. And this FDA is more of value to differentiate between the assessment of all other types of assessment, causality assessment from different regions that you do versus the FDA, so that we clearly know that this is something that are being submitted for the FDA. Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions. A huge thank you to our speaker for the very informative and timely talk, and also for responding to numerous questions that came in. We do have a few closing reminders. This activity is eligible for an attendance certificate which supports continuing education by SOCA, RAPS, SQA, and ACRP. Please refer to our website at fda.gov/CEDAR-SBIA for more details. You'll be able to obtain the attendance certificate only upon completion of the survey, which will remain open for 2 weeks. And remember, that's the January 27th deadline. Please remember to download the certificate immediately upon completing the survey. It cannot be retrieved after the fact. Let us know your comments and feedback via the survey. This will help guide the design of our future events. Additional tutorials are available through fda.gov/CEDAR-Learn. On behalf of CEDAR Small Business and Industry Assistance, we hope that you enjoyed today's presentation and found it helpful. We look forward to your presence at future webinars, which will be advertised on our website at fda.gov/CEDAR-SBIA. Thank you for attending, and this concludes today's webinar.